You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name and politics is our game. And we will be doing politics this evening because we have as our guest Dr. Arie Friedman, who's running in the Republican primary. That's the 10th Congressional District Republican primary. That's a hot race. There are at least 4 major candidates duking it out for that Republican nomination. And whoever wins that nomination is going to face, most likely, Julie Hamos, that's State Rep Julie Hamos, or Dan Seals, the winner of the Democratic nomination. We're taping the show on December 27th, the year 2009. There are about 37 days or so left, 5 weeks as we're taping it. As you're watching it, it'll, depending on where you are, some of you folks will be seeing it just before the end of this year. Others will be seeing it just after, in the first or second week of the new year. But, you know, well, who is Dr. Arie Friedman? He is somebody who grew up here in the area in Highland Park. He came here when he was, in third grade?
Second grade.
Second grade, attended Solomon Schechter Day School.
Correct.
In Evanston, right?
It was in Northbrook at the time.
Northbrook, okay.
And then the last year here in Skokie.
And then Highland Park High
School.
Then University of Chicago, and somewhat unusual for a University of Chicago graduate from the college. He then went and joined the Navy. Navy Flight School is where you started out,
right?
And became an active. You were a fixed and rotary flight. What flight?
I was an unrestricted naval aviator.
Unrestricted naval.
Primarily flew helicopters in the fleet, SH-60 Bravo Seahawks, off of small decks, cruisers and destroyers. It was an exciting 7 years.
Deployed during Operation Desert Storm?
Twice, once to the Gulf. And then numerous small deployments in the period.
And then Dr. Friedman came back, and fittingly enough for a doctor, he went to medical school at the University of Illinois.
Right. So when I was in the Navy, I wasn't a physician. Went afterwards to the University of Illinois.
And came out a pediatrician?
A pediatrician.
Were you top in your class at the University of Illinois?
I was first in my class at the University of Illinois.
You had a practice now, a pediatrics practice, group practice for what, 10 or 11 years?
We've been building it for now right around 9 years.
9 years.
9 years.
And you would like to be congressman. He would like to be the Republican nominee for
That's
Congress
right.
in the 10th Congressional District. Well, we'll get into more about the other issues, but as we're taping this on December 27th, I'm asking you, Dr. Friedman, should we frisk everybody getting on a plane in the United States?
No, I don't think that we should.
I mean, we had a near miss or a near calamity with a bomber who decided he was going to set off a bomb, essentially a bomb.
Mm-hmm, a bomb.
On a plane as he was flying into Detroit, right?
That's correct.
And so people are saying we have to clamp down, we should start frisking people.
Right.
The last hour of every flight, nobody should be allowed to move. What else? All sorts of other things. Is that the wisest policy? Or if you were in Congress, what do you think you might be recommending to the folks who set these policies as to what, if anything, they should do to adjust this policy relating to national security, relating to airplane safety?
These are largely security theater. The fact that you looked at every single solitary person as they walk through, frisk everybody, what it really does is just distribute your resources so that you're not really focusing on anybody in specific. I literally have a patient in my practice who's 6 now, who's on the no-fly list and gets frisked every time she goes through.
So this guy, who was that? That was Umar Farouk Abdul Muttalib?
Yeah, he's got a history. His father reported him to U.S. and British authorities as being somebody who was a radical.
He's from Nigeria?
That's correct.
That's an airport that's somewhat questionable security?
Of course.
We think he got on? Is that where he got on, the initial start of this flight in Nigeria?
Maybe, wasn't it Denmark? I may be mistaken.
I thought it was Amsterdam is where he switched planes.
Maybe.
But I think it started. So the one question is, what's the security like in Nigeria? And number 2, for people coming in and switching planes, do they go through security at Amsterdam where presumably it might be better?
I assume that they actually
Should we ask
don't.
those questions?
Of course.
They don't. So is that where it should be directed? Instead, we're going to start frisking everybody and all sorts of, a 95-year-old lady from New York, she's going to be frisked as she gets on the plane in New York. Does it make any sense?
No, it doesn't make any sense.
Is this political correctness run amok?
It's not only political correctness, but it's simply, I think that some of it at least is an attempt for them to make us feel secure. I mean, security theaters, the idea of creating an impression of security without actually doing anything about it.
Now, is this something you expect from the federal government in general, or is this an attack on the Obama administration?
No, this has been going on since long before that. Every time I go through an airport, I get frustrated like everybody else does.
So the blame for this, what do you call it, security theater, gets distributed to Bush as well?
Of course. I mean, it's...
and before him to Clinton?
I think that most of the security theater started up after 9/11. I mean, there were private organizations in charge of security before that. And after 9/11, it became primarily the TSA, and since then it's been what we've just seen, which is now we're going to tell everybody to sit still and not move, not out of their seat for the last hour. How does that fix any of the problems that we've dealt with?
All right. So what they should do?
What they should do is start being more intelligent about who they focus on. You know, there's a lot of resources here to be used. Somebody who comes from Nigeria, somebody whose father has reported to him, somebody who's on various no-fly lists is somebody who should be targeted very carefully for investigation.
This guy wasn't on a no-fly list. He was on some sort of list that had 500,000 people.
Right. He was on a security list of some sort, a watch list.
Watch list, but not where you could do much about it.
Right.
So he probably should have been on the no-fly list, you think, based on what we knew? And is it the reluctance to profile people? As some people say, we profile objects, we can do that. We'll start profiling underwear because he had something sewn to his underwear. Right. That's okay, but we don't want to profile people because it's more than comedy theater, it's more than security theater. It is about political correctness because somebody's going to say, look, not everybody getting on a plane in Nigeria is a security risk, but somebody getting on a plane in Nigeria whose father, who's a well-established guy, a big-time banker, but he on his own decides more than political correctness, he thinks somebody should keep an eye on his son.
Right.
That should be a tip-off. When your dad reports you, folks, here's a tip to the Homeland Security. Janet Napolitano, are you watching? When your father reports you, now it could be that your father's wacko, but it also could be maybe he's got broader world interests at heart.
Right.
Okay. And then he got on the plane, was it in Amsterdam or Nigeria, for what, a one-way ticket?
A one-way ticket.
Cash?
Yes.
Are we starting to build up a profile here? I mean, are these things, if you find them out, is there a way of tracking? I mean, the Obama administration said we were going to use science. We were going to use science, right? Yes. And so if you're using science here, shouldn't you be building this profile and tracking these things and saying, when enough of these factors pile up,
right,
then what you want to do is maybe talk to the person, ask him a few questions. Do we have anybody in this country who's experienced in, what do we call it, intelligence operations?
Of course, human, right.
Yeah, so we want somebody to do that and talk with him or her and see whether that person's a risk. And if they decide that person is, they don't go on the plane.
Right.
This is like 1 year into the Obama administration. Now, remember when September 11th happened? Well, critics would say, certainly Democratic critics, would say, well, look, they were there for 8 months, this is their responsibility. Okay, Barack Obama's been here for a year. Is it his responsibility? I mean,
yes.
Am I being too hard here?
You're not being too hard. These are important issues. I've recently seen some Democrat commentators say, well, it was just an attempted event, it wasn't a big deal. But
it was just not a big deal. Janet Napolitano, who's the Secretary for Homeland Security, she said today on December 27th, she says, yeah, it worked because some passenger jumped over and brought this guy down and prevented him and maybe disrupted him, and maybe he was ineptness. And she says that worked?
That the system worked.
Should Janet Napolitano be fired?
Yes.
I mean, she's completely incompetent.
Right.
Either that or she's competent, but she doesn't know how to speak English.
Well, and in the meantime, they're targeting people who go to tea parties and things along those lines as national security threats. And here we have somebody who actually literally tried to blow up an aircraft, and the system worked.
All right, so the Obama administration is trying to get out in front of this, and they're saying they're going to take an extensive look. We're going to see what happened, what should happen. Rahm Emanuel, he knows politics. Rahm senses this is not a plus day for the administration. So what you try to do is say we're taking a look at it, and hopefully in 30 days people will forget you're taking a look at it, and then
Of course. But except, I think people are going to have a hard time forgetting about it when they can't get up for the last hour of an hour and 45-minute flight.
Should the United States bar international flights from it coming into the United States if that flight originates from a so-called bad security airport? Should we have a list of bad security airports and say, folks, you can have any kind of security you want, you just can't fly into the United States? And if you're flying in directly to Amsterdam, you can't have flights coming into the United States unless you assure us that somebody coming in from a bad security airport has been checked.
Right.
When they change planes.
And I think one of the
Is that defensible? I mean, seriously.
It's absolutely something to be looked at, and I think one of the criteria. Let me finish.
Okay.
One of the criteria should be, when you're deciding whether it's a high-risk airport or not, is whether the airport itself will accept our security people to go and investigate what their situation is. So you can have a high-risk airport, even the airport that this guy originated from, but if we were able to send our own people proactively forward and to start and to have it be a more secure environment, that'd be one thing. If they said no, then that's an airport perhaps we should consider.
And also we'd want to be able to do random checks.
Of course.
Since it's a public building, presumably they're okay, since people flying through would be able to check.
Right.
So do you think that Janet Napolitano, head of the Department of Homeland Security, might be doing something like this?
I don't know. I don't know what she's thinking.
All right, but that would be your recommendation. If you're elected to Congress, if you get the Republican nomination, if you then win the election in November of 2010, and you're now a congressman, this is the kind of stuff you would be doing?
This is the sort of thing I'm interested in.
Okay. You're also interested in healthcare?
Yes.
Because you're a doctor?
A physician, yes.
You've been practicing for 11 years. Excuse
correct.
me, 9 years.
11 years.
11 years.
That's right, as a pediatrician.
And your practice has been for the last 9?
Yes.
You think you know something about healthcare?
A little bit.
You think you know something about how doctors are treated, and you think you know something about how they can, our healthcare system in the United States could be reformed.
Right. Not only do I know it as a physician, but I've built a practice from scratch and am the managing partner of that business.
There are 35 to 50 million people who are uninsured. Is that right in the United States?
I don't believe that number is correct.
What's the right number?
Probably more around 12 million truly uninsured.
Well, others who are uninsured, but you're saying they don't really care to be insured.
Well, there's people who are essentially insured by default because they're eligible for other programs, simply haven't signed up for them. If you bring your child in who's not on Medicaid to a hospital like the University of Chicago, the first thing they'll do is sign you up for Medicaid. So it's de facto insurance.
De facto.
There are illegal aliens who we're talking about. The number is a little bit shady, 12 million, 15 million.
So is that who you're saying is uninsured, the illegal aliens?
I'm saying that they should not be counted in that number.
They should not be counted. So there are 12 million who are legitimately uninsured. Right. In your view, it's legitimate because they are Americans, they want to be insured,
right.
They can't afford it, they
Correct.
can't get it.
Somewhere in that range.
So what would you do about those 12 million people? Anything, or just say tough?
No, I think that a safety net's a reasonable thing for those folks. And one of the things that I've heard people talk about that I like is catastrophic care with some sort of sliding scale for their own premiums. We don't want anybody to be devastated by illnesses or accidents in this country, but we certainly want people to have some ownership of their own policies and to pay at least some portion of what they consume.
So we took care of that. Say that's healthcare reform. That's now Arie Friedman healthcare reform, right. If you get to Congress. You took care of the uninsured. Anything else you do, or you just say, okay, the system's okay, we just don't change
No,
it?
There's lots of things we can do to bring the rest of our costs down. Competitiveness always does that.
And how do we do that? How do we make it more competitive?
Well, one, you can break down the barriers between states so that I can buy my insurance from Texas, you can buy it from Texas.
Right now you can't. And somebody in Illinois can't buy insurance, health insurance, except for people in Illinois.
That's correct.
You can't go out of state.
That's correct.
Now people say, well, one problem with that, maybe the person selling insurance out of Texas, out of Oregon, not complying with all the mandates for things that need to be covered.
Those are specifically the mandates that are causing us trouble. So my wife and I have 5 children. We're not having any more, but we're paying for in vitro fertilization coverage. So that sort of mandate
is mandated, and you pay for that cost. If you could go and buy from somebody outside of Illinois who wasn't mandating that, then the cost would be lower.
Right. And there are states, Illinois is not one of them, where there are very few insurers. And so they have a problem with a lack of competitiveness. If you're and I don't know which states are the worst, but if you're in a state that has only 2 or 3 primary insurers, if you can buy it from another state, that brings other competitive forces in. The other thing that has to happen is we have to decouple people's insurance from their employment in 2 ways. One, people should see what their own insurance costs. When I negotiate for my practice, I'm not negotiating for necessarily the economic interests of my employees, I'm doing them for mine. And it may not be what's best for them. If people can go out and buy their own insurance and get the same tax benefits that the business does, then they're more likely to make a competitive decision.
And they're going to care more because they're deciding, they're paying the insurance, they're going to care about the coverage, they're going to care about the nuances of the policy. It's now their decision.
And it's
right,
not,
and you do that by correcting the tax code, which gives a great incentive for employers to provide it because they get a tax break that individuals don't if they buy it personally.
And if you're buying your own insurance, then it doesn't matter what job you have, whether you lose your job or anything along those lines. So, yeah, competitiveness is what's going to bring the price down, not a big, massive government program.
So if you were there, you would vote no on the Obamacare?
No.
Unequivocally
Loudly no.
You would like to see malpractice, medical malpractice reform?
Absolutely.
Does this bill do anything about that?
There have been versions of this bill that have set up pilot programs. I don't know whether they're currently in the 2,000-page monstrosities.
Nothing like caps on damage awards, which we have actually in Illinois. Its constitutionality is being challenged, but you would favor caps.
Absolutely.
Not on economic losses, but on punitive damages.
Punitive damages. I was wearing the green armband with the rest of my colleagues.
Pain and suffering, that type of thing.
Right. And whatever the limits are with the 250.
What do you folks pay now for what's your malpractice premium?
We're pediatricians, so we pay somewhere in the area of about $9,000 per physician. But
per year?
Per year, which is very low.
How many physicians do you have in your group?
There's 3 of us.
Okay, so about $30,000 a year.
Right, but if we were OBs, that same number would be maybe $450,000.
That could be high. If you were doing brain surgery, it'd be even higher.
Even higher, and some of those folks are moving to Kenosha and places like that.
All right, and you're running in this race with, we say, 3 other major candidates.
3 other major candidates.
Beth Coulson, Bob Dole, Dick Green. What do those guys and ladies say? Same thing as you just said?
I haven't heard them be as comprehensive as I just was. I think that in general, they're all going to say in this election that they're against government-run health care. And
Dick Green, he's running basically an air campaign. You know something about an air campaign. His air campaign is pretty much just TV ads?
That's correct.
Folks, we've invited Dick Green here, but he doesn't think he has to come here because he doesn't think the 10th Congressional District thinks it's necessary. They just get their information by ads, he says, I think. He may do some forums, right?
And he's occasionally gone and shook hands places, but primarily TV ads.
Well, the 10th Congressional District is pretty large, right?
It is.
Where does it go? It starts in Wilmette?
It starts in Wilmette, across to around Glenview, up to just north of Gurnee, and then across to Waukegan.
So it goes up through the North Shore, it goes up through Kenilworth and Wilmette and Winnetka,
and
Highland Park, Highwood, Lake Bluff, Lake Forest, Waukegan.
Yes.
Cuts over west of there, Libertyville, Mount Prospect.
Correct.
Arlington Heights.
And the far half of Palatine.
All right, it's a big district. We air in a lot of that, about half of that. But Green says no, he doesn't want to be here. Beth Coulson, she's been a state rep for 13 years.
That's right.
She said she'd be here. She changed her mind. She lost her voice, and then she lost her will. So she's not here. Maybe she'll find it. I mean, seriously, Beth, if you want to come on, you can still do it. But you shouldn't tell somebody you'll do the show, and then I went on and stuck my neck out and said, Beth will be here, give her a high grade for transparency, and then she just changes her mind. That doesn't sound fair.
No, I agree.
Should we have somebody running for Congress who's fair?
Yes.
We do. So you got Coulson, and you don't know her views because, she puts some things on her website, but she's not here to answer questions.
Correct.
Same thing with Green. And then Bob Dole, he gave us a 10-minute phone interview. That's nice, but we'd like to have Bob here. All right, so that's your competition. We'll be referring to them from time to time to remind people there's one person who's here who's answering questions. He is Dr. Arie Friedman. He's running for Congress in the Republican primary. We don't endorse anybody for office, but we do endorse the notion that everybody should come and answer questions, right?
I agree.
Because there are some tough questions. I mean, you just said you would vote no on the Obama health care program. Obama's sending 30,000 troops to Afghanistan. The general there, McChrystal, wanted 40,000.
Even up to 80,000.
Would you have sent the 40,000 he wanted?
I would have sent him whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
What I will say is that the people we have in the military, from the generals on down to the lance corporals, are extremely intelligent people, highly trained, and they spend their lives doing this work. And we shouldn't be micromanaging how they fight any more than you'd micromanage your surgeon as he's performing an operation. What really makes me angry as a former military officer is the idea that we can't win. And I think that that's clearly false.
You think we can win in Afghanistan? Winning being defined as?
Winning being defined as returning it to some stability in the control of a civilian government, not being a haven for the Taliban or Al-Qaeda, not have with the fear of leaving it and having it return to the way it was before we got there in the first place.
Yeah, but people talk about the front changing. Where's it going to? What other countries are they throwing out of the terrorist concerns? What are some countries?
Well, Pakistan's a real place right now, and I'll tell you, there's stories now of Pakistani military officials saying that they're not going to pursue the Taliban on their side of the border because they know we're leaving in a little while.
Because
18
Obama
months.
said, yeah. When,
right. And then we say, well, we're actually staying. We just said we might leave in 18 months. And they say, these guys are going to be here for 1,000 years, and they'll be here for 1,000 more.
What does Coulson say? Coulson say you got to be sure to stay, be tough, resolute?
I haven't heard her say that.
Beth, if you're here, we could ask you. We're not picking on you as much as we are picking on Bob Dole. 10-minute interview is fine, Bob, but you got to come here. Dick Green, where are you? You say you're a Harvard economist. I mean, what does that mean? He's got an undergraduate degree in economics from Harvard? I mean, come on now. You should be able to handle. I'm a local access guy. I'm a piece of cake. I mean, really. You afraid? Israel, that's a big issue in the campaign.
Sure.
There's a significant Jewish population. That's a part of your coalition that you're building, right?
Absolutely.
Jewish Republicans, Jewish Independents, Jewish Democrats. You'll take them all.
Absolutely. Israel is maybe the issue that's been important for Mark Kirk as he's running this district. This is a district that's voted for the Democrat nominees for president consistently. Mark's been winning, and John Porter before him, largely on the issue of Israel. And there's not been a single solitary person in Congress better than Mark Kirk on Israel.
Yeah,
and I plan to follow in his footsteps.
Should the Israelis try to take out the nuclear capability from Iran?
They may very well have to. The reality is that, and if we were going to look at it from a comprehensive standpoint, we should do it. I mean, the reality is that we should be the ones who do it.
Do you think we will?
I don't think we will. I think the Israelis will be forced to.
And if they do you think the United States will stand by them and support them?
We won't have any choice.
Because yes, they will?
Well, we won't. Yes, because we won't have any choice.
They should.
My well, here's why I think that we absolutely have no choice. Even if we didn't want to, the instant they launch an attack, we're involved in a war. The Iranians have made it very clear that they're going to mine the Straits of Hormuz. The primary purpose of the United States Navy in that area is to prevent exactly that situation. We would establish a no-fly zone over the Straits of Hormuz and do whatever necessary to keep it open, and that's a war.
Beth Coulson, have you heard her say the same thing you've just said?
No.
Do you think she would be supporting Israel if it came to them taking out the nuclear capability, trying to of Iran?
I can't answer that question.
We don't know. Beth, we'd like to have you here. Bob Dole, what would you say? We don't know. He's not here. Have you heard him?
I have not heard him.
Dick Green? I mean, he does. Dick Green says an ad, and you see the ad running, and he says, yeah, yeah, yeah. Is this basically what he says?
Yes.
I mean, Dick, Mark Kirk's been the congressman here, and you want to replace him. People think it's a fairly sophisticated district. They need people who say more than yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, this is not a sing-along, right? Seriously, right? I mean, I'm not being disrespectful here. You need people, folks, who are going to step up and tell their views. I know some. I can guess on their views. You're the folks who have to know them. Look, should we move Gitmo, the detainees, to the Thomson Correction Center?
I was the first person in this campaign to come out against that. I think that's a horrible idea. My primary reason for thinking it's a bad idea is I think that the North Shore becomes a target. If you're living in Afghanistan, planning an operation, you know, the Thomson Center and Chicago are that far apart, and you're not going to attack the little center in the middle of no place.
So you would leave the detainees in Gitmo?
Absolutely. It's a great island prison.
All right. Should Obama be supporting the protesters in Iran?
Absolutely. That's our only hope, is that that government falls. They're absolutely going to pursue nuclear weapons.
If that government fell, then maybe they wouldn't pursue nuclear capability.
I mean, there are certainly elements of the Friedman movement that say that they would not pursue those policies.
Has Obama said that he's supporting the protesters?
I think he said something along those lines.
Very strong, in the same sense that Ronald Reagan did and talked to the Russian dissidents?
Right. I mean, you know, Andrei Sakharov has said that was electrified them in the Gulag when Ronald Reagan came out and supported them.
And you supported that?
Of course.
And there's a significant Russian population actually now in the North Shore.
There's a very large Russian population.
District.
And they're terrified, by the way. They're terrified of what's happening to our economy and our way of life.
So you want them to be a part of your coalition?
Absolutely.
You're looking for their votes?
I am.
February 2nd?
February 2nd. And before, you can vote very early now.
Okay. And the vets. You're a vet.
All right.
What was it? 7 years on active duty, 11 years as a reserve?
That's correct.
You're a legitimate vet.
I'm a legitimate veteran.
There are a lot of vets in the 10th Congressional District. Right. You're looking for them.
Right, and you know there's all sorts of interest in the veteran population. They're a little bit of a disparate group, but you have people who are worried about their veteran medicine. They're worried about their veteran opportunities as veterans. They're worried about what national security is about.
And you're looking at Jewish Republicans.
Jewish Republicans.
And Jewish independents.
Absolutely.
And Jews who are concerned about Israel. You think you're the best candidate in the Republican
I'm absolutely
primary?
the best candidate.
You think you're better than the Democrats on Israel, on national security?
I'm very worried about the Democrats, including Julie Hamos, who's billed herself as the daughter of Holocaust survivors at the Bethel Forum, which was held a few weeks ago, could not commit to Jerusalem as an undivided capital of Israel. Couldn't commit to that.
Well, one thing to say about Julie is she at least came on the show. We look forward to having her back. If she wins the nomination, we'd like to see her. We'd like to see the Republican nominee. Whoever they are, we'll be fair and square. All right. Dan Seals, do you think you can rely on him if you're an Israeli?
No.
He said when asked a few years back if there were a conflict between Iran and Israel, on what side would he come down? He'd come down on the side of peace.
Which could mean the annihilation of Israel, right? Once Israel's a smoking hole, then
Mr.
there's
Seals,
peace.
if you want to come on the show and explain that, that's fine. We'll be fair, but you got to come on here. 3 years we haven't been able to get him on the show. I don't know. You would endorse Republicans generally?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because Beth Coulson, when she was given the chance on this show in 2000 to endorse George Bush, she said she didn't know her district's sophisticated, she wouldn't endorse.
Okay.
You would have endorsed George
I would have
Bush?
endorsed George
2002, she was given the chance on this show to endorse Jim Ryan running for governor, Republican. She said, don't know his program. She couldn't endorse.
I would endorse him. I mean, there's things that I don't agree with him on.
But you would endorse
But you're more
him
likely to
over
get
the,
you're more likely to
Democrat.
get conservative viewpoints, successfully passing in Springfield if you have a Republican in office.
And then she said, Beth Coulson, 13 years as a state rep, when I asked her in 2002 whether she endorsed Mark Kirk, she said she really didn't know enough about him at the time in his program to endorse. You would have
After
endorsed
2
Mark
years,
Kirk?
I love Mark Kirk.
You would have endorsed him?
I mean, there's a few things I disagree with him. I would have endorsed him.
You would have endorsed him.
And I'll endorse him if he
So what do you
wins
think
the
about
primary.
Coulson? Does that make sense to you? Is she, as some people say, a rhino, Republican in name only?
Yes.
You unequivocally. That's your
Unequivocally,
view.
yes.
Because of what I just said, or other
Well,
reasons?
I've been running against her for a few months now and know a little bit about her positions, and I don't see any other way to describe her.
All right. What about Bob Dole? Is he a rhino?
He's not a rhino
He's
at all.
not a rhino.
No.
You disagree with him on some things. Bailouts?
Yeah,
on bailouts.
I read your blog on that, and from what I read, I would disagree with him on that.
You would have opposed the bailout
of
the $700 billion for the financial sector.
I was throwing my shoes at
Dole,
the TV.
I don't know what he said because he said we couldn't hang out a sign, the bank's out of business. But I said, does that mean you're against? He said, I don't know. Right?
Well, the banks eventually, some of these banks are eventually going to have to go out of business.
We're going to continue to speak as the credits roll. The time has gone very fast. Thanks so much for Arie Friedman, Dr. Arie Friedman. He is a Republican. He is the candidate in the Republican primary in the 10th Congressional District. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, it's a real pleasure. This was fun.
Went quick. All right, so Green, we don't know. I mean, Green says no more bailouts, right?
That's what he says.
So
Not a single dollar more.
Oh, did he oppose the other bailout, the original bailout, the $700 billion? We don't know. He's not
I haven't
here.
discussed it.
The social issues, abortion. You're pro-choice?
That's probably the best way to describe me. Although I think no right is absolute. I'm a strong opponent of federal funding of abortion, and as a pediatrician would support parental notification laws. And late-term abortions, I think, except in the case of the health or life of the mother, are something that I would very much support bans on.
All right. Where does Dole stand? He's somewhere in between? Is that what he told me?
The only difference I see between his views and mine is that on the latest Illinois Family Institute poll, he supported a bill that would require physicians to counsel a woman contemplating an abortion about the pain that the unborn child would suffer. And as a physician, as a physician, I'm opposed to those sorts of
differences
engagements.
between you and Coulson on that issue?
I believe that she described herself as strongly pro-choice at one of the forums.
You think she's more pro-choice than you are? Does she support parental notice?
I don't know the answer to that.
You support parental notice?
I do.
All right. Dick Green, do we know where he stands?
I don't know.
We don't. Guns? Are you in favor of gun control?
No, I'm not in favor of gun control.
Would you think anybody in the North Shore in the 10th Congressional District should have a right to own a gun in their home?
Absolutely.
And if they're in Chicago, you can't control that, but if you could, you would say they should have a right as well?
Absolutely.
Same-sex marriage, you in favor of that?
No.
Civil unions?
That's a state issue. I don't have anything I don't object to it on any kind of gut level. If that's what a state wants, I'm fine with it.
Most important issue as you see it in this race, in the Republican primary, 10th Congressional District?
I could have given a different answer a week ago. It's medicine. Medicine, medicine, medicine. That's everything.
So if you vote against the Obama health care program, but it becomes law,